Hello folks, welcome to Postcards from here. I'm Mr. B and we're at the San Jose Museum of Art. Today we're going to work on an assignment called Matter of Fact. Matter of Fact is going to use lines, shapes, and colors to create a pattern that's going to fool our eyes a little bit and create an optical illusion. An optical illusion is just that. When your eyes trick your brain just a little tiny bit and make you see something that doesn't exist. Let's get started, folks. Today's materials are pretty simple. We're always going to start with our sketchbook. Today we're going to use some nice watercolor paper so we can use our watercolor paints. Make sure you bring some water and some paper towels to clean our brushes. Or you can use markers with colored pencils or crayons. In fact, you can even just use a pencil. All right, folks, let's get started with our most important tool, our sketchbook. Like we talked about last time, our sketchbook is where we start all of our projects and work out our ideas. I'm just going to open up my sketchbook, and what I'm going to write down are some facts that I know. Facts are true. That's a simple fact. What about another fact? We want to make sure we have a few so we have better ideas when we make our final project. The smallest bone in our body is in our ear. That's a long fact. Now we have to make sure we're keeping track of how many words because we're going to have to make artwork out of these facts. If they're really long, it can get really complicated. Let's see, how about this last fact? Only 5% of the ocean has been explored. In my sketchbook, I'm just going to write down all the facts that I can think of, everything that I know is true, that we can prove. That way I'll have more ideas so that when I make my final project, I'll have more options to create from. I'm going to choose one so I can start practicing my design. On the next sheet of paper, what I'm going to do is take the fact that I love and I'm going to try to practice with that one on my next sheet. So for me, I'm going to do a really easy one so we can see how it's done, and I'm going to challenge you guys to make your fact whatever you want it to be. I'm going to use facts are true. On my next sheet of paper, I have to make sure that fact fits on the full sheet of paper. If I try to write it really big, I'll run out of space. So a little trick that I do is to divide my page in half. I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to put a little line between the top and the bottom. And it can be a zigzag, it can be a swirly, it can be a straight line. It's up to you. Use your pencils very lightly because pencils is going to be just step number one. And if I write my pencils very dark, it's going to be hard to get rid of those pencil marks. So let's practice using our pencil very lightly. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start writing my facts are true on this page, and I'm going to try to space it out so it fills the entire page. The way I'm going to do this is to make sure I start from the very top of my page and bring down the line all the way to the bottom curve there. Do you guys see how I'm bringing it all the way from the very top all the way to the bottom here? Now this assignment can get a little frustrating because we've never done it before. If I start to write everything in and I realize that I've written my letters really fat, well, it's not going to fit. I got to get my letters on a diet, make sure they fit on my page. And that's okay. That's why we're using our pencils very lightly so that if I make a mistake, I can come back and erase it. Do you guys see how I'm bringing my letters all the way to the very top and all the way to the very bottom? Because what we're doing is building up new spaces. We're going to look at these negative spaces between the letters to add color later so we can make our design. So I'm making all my letters capital so they're nice and tall. Next thing I want to do, I'm going to fit in my next word, which is R. And if I mess up, I just have to erase. If I make my letters too wide, I have to erase them and make sure they're just a little bit thinner. This one might take a little bit of trial and error, so I want you guys to not give up and make sure you keep working in your sketchbook. That's exactly what our sketchbooks are for. Facts are, now I gotta write true, nice and big here. I really wanna make sure I fill up that space, and I'm gonna use the same technique. I'm gonna bring my pencil all the way to the top line and bring my line all the way down, and I'm gonna follow this top line when I make my R. Notice that I'm making all capital letters so that they really stretch out. Now I have my design. Facts are true. Should we move on to the next step? Once we've worked out our idea in our sketchbook, it's time to transfer our design onto a nice large sheet of paper. If you're working with watercolor paints, make sure you're using watercolor paper. If not, don't worry about it. You can use a regular sheet of typing paper. So let's get started. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take my page, I'm going to divide it in half, I'm going to put a little swirl line that goes all the way across. And remember that I'm using my pencil as light as I can. In fact, sometimes I even hold it back here so my grip gets a little bit more loose. If I hold it up here, it's going to be nice and tight. So we can create new shapes between our letters. We're making some new shapes, and some shapes we've already seen, like triangles and squares. But what would you guys call this shape? I don't know. Now this one, I want to fill that bottom page, so I could make my letters a little bit wider on this one. Trace your pencil line to make your line nice and dark. You just want to make your lines really stand out so we can see a contrast between my lines and my color. Will you use crayons, Sharpies, or even just a pen? It's up to you. Take your time. If I make a mistake on ink, I really can't erase it. So I want to make sure I'm slowing down. Positive space are all these letters we're creating, and the negative space is all the space between those letters. You notice how I messed up here and I didn't trace exactly? That's okay. That's exactly why we started with pencils. And our next step, we'll clean that all up. You can use different color markers to make your lines. I just wanted to use one solid color, but it's up to you. Good. I got my second step done. I've traced everything I drew with my pencil. Now we have to move on to our third step.
It's a fact of the day. Did you know watercolors are some of the oldest paints? Around 15,000 to 10,000 BC, artists were using watercolors for their cave paintings to record the world around them. Fact of the day.
With this next step, we're really going to clean up our page and make it look like we're experts with drawing with ink. Now it's time to get rid of all these extra pencil marks here. We use our pencil to give us a guide, so when we put down our inks, we have a nice guideline for us to follow. But for this next step, we want to get rid of all those sloppy pencil marks. This is a trick, by the way, that all kinds of artists use. Just a little tip, don't go crazy on your eraser, because if I scrape, it's gonna tear my paper up. Notice? Nice and clean. Only ink. Now the fun part, folks, we're going to add some color. You can choose whatever color you want. I'm using some colored pencils today. I'm going to start off with a blue. And I want to show you guys just a couple little things about using these pencils. Now, sometimes if I start to use the very tip of my colored pencil, it's so pointy that it's going to take a really long time to fill in this part here. And if you notice my lines, they're kind of scratchy because I'm using the sharpest part of my pencil to cover up a wide sheet of paper. So instead, I want to show you guys another little trick when we do some shading. You can turn your hand around. Instead of holding it just like this, you can put the pencil on the inside and hold it like this. Or you can choose to hold your pencil more like this, where your hand is a little bit back. And we're going to try to use the side of our pencil lead here. Notice how much more color I can get on there and how much faster it is to get that color on there. I'm going to try to use different colors on here. You can use whatever colors you want and as many as you want. I'm going to color in everything on my page. I'm going to color in all of the negative spaces around my letters because that's what we're making our design. Now, notice how I'm trying to keep my pencil going in the same direction. If I get my colors and start to go like this, well, does that look good? Not really. Looks pretty sloppy. Try to keep your pencils going in the same direction because even the way we apply our pencils on our page becomes a big part of our project. I'm gonna put more color on this, but for now, I'd like to take a break so I can show you guys how we're gonna work with watercolor next. For this example, I went ahead and came up with a different fact. Crows understand physics. Did you know that? It's a good fact. And I also use different materials. I started the same way with my sketchbook, but instead of using a marker, I used crayon. And so I'm gonna add some watercolor. I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of a couple tips on using watercolor. I have a nice brand new set, and this set can last me a really long time if I'm careful with it. If I take my brush and start to go in here and start digging for gold, of course, I'm not gonna find gold, but I will ruin my watercolors. So what we're gonna do first is activate our watercolor palette. What I like to do is just take a little bit of water on my brush and just come over to the top of my paints and go ahead and put it right on top of each color. I'm just gonna put a little bit of water on top of the paint itself and then let it sit there so it can start to like wake up, come alive, activate. There you go. Once I have my color, you'll notice that I'm going back into my water all the time in between colors because I don't want to contaminate or make a mess or get the rest of my paints really, really dirty. I want to make sure I'm always using a clean brush when I'm going into my new colors. When you are ready to wash your brush, all you have to do is rinse it in this water and take it to your paper towel and just dab it on the paper towel. You'll notice that once it doesn't have any color on it, it's pretty clean and I can come back and pick up some more color. You see how much paint I get from just rubbing the top of my watercolor palette very lightly? If I'm careful with the way I use my paints, this watercolor set can last me years and years. Same with our brushes. Our brushes as artists, our brushes are very important tools for us. I have one friend who's a painter and he has one brush that he's had for over 20 years. And the way he's made it last so long is by making sure he takes care of it. This is it, folks. We're all done. I'm presenting you guys my fact. Can you guys read it? Crows understand physics. Good to know when you need help on your homework. And if you notice, the watercolor stays away from the crayon. It resists. Wax and water don't mix. Try that at home, play with it, and see what you can find out. It's fun because we can use text, line, and shapes to not only communicate what we want, but also create something that's beautiful. Let me share the first one we started. Facts are true. And that's really important to know, especially today. Facts are true. Which facts are you going to share with us? I use markers and colored pencils, but you can use crayons, you can use paint. In fact, you can even use coffee and tea and all kinds of other things around your house to get color on your page. I'm curious to see what you guys are going to do, and maybe you guys can share it with us here at the museum. Thanks a lot for being with me, and I'll see you guys next time.